Meow, Huples cat, and a still somewhat sleepy wolfie terrier at 6:30 in the morning. Two items of news from the UK have propelled me to get out of bed early.
We received some active intelligence from armed forces personnel saying that America is prepared to act against Russia if it continues to pose a threat.
Bradford Full Spectrum Survival has been warning people for months that nuclear war is imminent or even very, very likely, and I kind of disagree. I do think it's much more likely this morning, the 18th of October, than it was yesterday. First, a little bit of a background editorial from me, which you may or may not agree with. It doesn't really matter. There's only ever been three outcomes from the war special operations that Russia's undertook in Ukraine. Those three outcomes are a negotiated peace, Ukraine gets completely beaten by Russia and occupied, Ukraine beats back Russia to Russia's borders. I'm for peace, I'm for a negotiated peace, I'm for referendums in the areas under dispute held by the UN with neither Ukraine nor Russia involved in the voting. Nobody's going to listen to me. The first item of news that I find very concerning is that President Zelenskiy of Ukraine has announced that 30% of all of Ukraine's power plants have been destroyed over the last few days. I suspect it's more than 30% of his power stations, because he's probably including all of Ukraine's power stations in that total, including the ones in Russian-occupied Ukraine. Modern army can't fight with modern weapons if they don't have reliable power sources. Sure, the Ukrainians can use generators to try and service the complicated weaponry they've been given by the forces of the West, NATO alliance. But it's getting cold in Canada, so it's probably getting cold in Ukraine. And without electricity, a lot of those homes aren't going to get heated. A lot of those homes won't have mains running water. A lot of the food processing plants won't function. A lot of the refrigerators and freezers won't work. Faced with millions starving and freezing, and then evacuating, this war looks entirely different. So what's my second item of news that I woke up to this morning that I'm really worried about? Well, Ben Wallace has urgently flown to Washington DC for talk. No, not this Ben Wallace, this one. Ben Wallace, United Kingdom Defence Secretary. Now this is very worrying. We don't know specifically why he needs to have face-to-face talks in Washington DC, or why he didn't appear before a Commons committee and had to fly to Washington DC urgently. But he's the UK Defence Secretary. This means violence, not pleasure. Now the UK is a mess, but militarily it's still very much a loyal poodle of America. So calling in the Defence Secretary isn't about Britain.
China has a lot to learn to compete with the US as the world's top gun. But some former British military pilots appear willing to offer advice in return for generous pay packages. A Western official says around 30 ex-fast jet and helicopter pilots are working in China right now, and more are being targeted in what one analyst called a major security breach.
Let's be honest, China is an enemy. As such, we have got British subjects who have decided that their interests are best served by teaching our enemy how to defeat us. This is incredibly frightening.
Pilots who can fly jets like this Typhoon, as well as others, curiously haven't broken any laws by training the Chinese. It's an embarrassing loophole that's quickly being closed, including with new legislation. A Ministry of Defence spokesperson said, "All serving and former personnel are already subject to the Official Secrets Act, and we are reviewing the use of confidentiality contracts and non-disclosure agreements across defence, while the new National Security Bill will create additional tools to tackle contemporary security challenges, including this one." Recruiters have also targeted pilots who fly the UK's F-35 fast jets. It has top-secret technology, a prime target for espionage. But officials say they don't believe any F-35 personnel accepted the lure of salaries of around £240,000. The MOD has issued an alert warning serving and former staff to be aware of these approaches and turn them down.
This is about maybe Iran, North Korea, China or Russia. America may be thinking they're going to attack or be attacked by one or all of those countries in the very near future. Hence the urgency to have face-to-face talks with America's strongest ally, and an ally that has Trident missile capability. For sure, Biden-led Western response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been bungled. It hasn't stopped the invasion, and it's got a lot of Ukrainians killed. And they seem to have painted themselves in a box marked We can't negotiate with Russia, we have to defeat Russia. This is really bad news. The other thing is Liz was hiding yesterday, and Penny Mordaunt, who probably should have been the Prime Minister, actually said she really had serious and urgent reasons for not being there and kept saying that but didn't actually say why. This might be why. If the Allies are considering going to war with Iran, China, North Korea and or Russia, that would explain her absence. That would also explain why she looks so upset. That might also explain why she looks so serious. This isn't something she'd bring up in the cabinet quite yet until the Defence Secretary's been briefed in Washington. Now, I don't bring this up as clickbait, and I just wanted you to be aware of those two things that I'm aware of. That puts me on a higher alert, a higher prep status than I was yesterday, and I think it's reasonable to actually keep an eye on what's going on. Why the Defence Secretary in Washington DC? I don't know. Out of interest, the committee he was supposed to talk to wanted to ask him specific questions about three main things. W93, the Trident II nuclear missile. England's going to buy them off America. There's no way this government's not buying them, so that's not why he had to go to Washington DC. American protectionism and export controls. Since Britain exited Brexit, partially funded by Russia, and the government party, the Conservatives who wanted Brexit in the main, also partially funded by Russia. And no, neither of those statements is false, neither of those statements is made up. They would probably not summon the Defence Secretary to Washington DC.
And more are being targeted in what one analyst called a major security breach.
Let's be honest, China is an enemy.
They do have a Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, who's currently probably running the British government. But Britain as a military force is very firmly in America's camp. Well, I hope I'm wrong in my assumptions, but I do think it's reasonable to bring this up to people's attention right now. I do think we need to actually look very closely at what's going on and make steps and take precautions as far as we can to deal with what could be an absolutely appalling thing. So stay sane. Toodles. And you also got Wolfie up early. As you can see, he's hopping around. Hopefully this will be the last day of a plastic bag. He doesn't like it. And hopefully we take the dressing off tomorrow and he'll be fine.